by our news and politics teams. We are all working from home, so apologies in advance if there are any technical issues or if either of my cats ripped the Ethernet cable out of the wall again. Again, if you are just tuning in, I am NowThis senior politics producer, Alan Piper. We are expecting the President of the United States at any moment. In the meantime, I'd like to try to use this time to answer some of your questions, so please type them in the comments on Facebook or tweet them at me at apiper13. Now, moments ago, the U.S. officially crossed the sobering threshold of over 4 million cases of the coronavirus. There have been over 1,000 deaths in just the last 24 hours. Other news that is breaking at the moment involves the Defense Authorization Bill. In a bipartisan move, Democrats and Republicans have voted for Elizabeth Warren's amendment to take the names of Confederate traitors off of our military bases. President Trump had threatened to veto the bill if this was done. He effectively threatened to defund the military. But Republicans have urged him not to do that, and in fact the bill passed with a veto-proof majority, so were he to carry out his threat and veto it, he would likely embarrass himself by having his veto overruled. It has been a somewhat rocky week for the president. It started with his Fox News interview that aired on Sunday. Chris Wallace gave a more probing interview than the president has recently subjected himself to, and he spent much of it bragging about a cognitive test. And in a follow-up Fox News interview, he bragged about it yet again. It is believed that the test he was referring to was the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. He talks about the fact that he aced it and that doctors were, quote, very surprised that he was able to pass it. He describes it as having been very difficult. It is important to note that this is not an IQ test. This is a test that is usually used to determine if someone is non-compass. The questions asked include identifying an elephant from a series of animals, being able to recall simple series of words such as, according to President Trump, person, woman, man, TV, camera. And the president said that the further you get in the test, the harder the questions get. Reportedly, the last question asks what city you are currently in. The fact that doctors felt such a test was needed for the President of the United States is not something one would expect the President of the United States to wish to call attention to. And boasting that the doctors were very surprised is also not a great reflection on him. Now, the President said this week that he is facing this coronavirus pandemic with, quote, relentless focus. It has been hard to see that that focus is present from following the president's Twitter feed. He has tweeted and retweeted over 50 times today. My phone has pinged and popped a couple of times in the meantime, so it might be more than that. These tweets have been largely attacks on his apparent political rivals. Here is the president. We're going to hear what he has to say, and the team and I will attempt to fact-check him in real time.
Thank you. Thank you. We've had a tremendous week uniting the country in our fight against the China virus. I've reminded people of the importance of masks.
All right, so I already have to make a correction. This virus is not the, quote, China virus. Viruses do not have nationalities. The name of this virus is COVID-19. If you were to ascribe it a nationality, you might call it the U.S. virus, because the U.S. currently has more cases of it than any other country.
All over the country, and also about contracting with Pfizer. We made a big, beautiful contract with Pfizer. We think they're very close, but we have a lot of companies that are very close to produce a vaccine. And I wanted to come out again today to share some additional news with you. This afternoon, my political team came to me and laid out our plans for the convention in Jacksonville, Florida. It's a place I love. I love that state. The drawings look absolutely beautiful. I never thought we could have something look so good so fast with everything going on. And everything was going well. A tremendous list of speakers, thousands of people wanting to be there, and I mean, in some cases, desperately be there. They wanted to attend, people making travel arrangements all over the country. They wanted to be there. The pageantry, the signs, the excitement were really top of the line. But I looked at my team and I said, the timing for this event is not right. It's just not right with what's happened recently, the flare-up in Florida. To have a big convention, it's not the right time. It's really something that, for me, I have to protect the American people. That's what I've always done. That's what I always will do. That's what I'm about. They said, sir, we can make this work very easily. We have great enthusiasm, incredible enthusiasm. Even the polls say about the most enthusiasm they've seen. We can do this safely and we can do it responsibly. And I said, there's nothing more important in our country than keeping our people safe, whether that's from the China virus or the...
Okay, it is not the China virus. COVID-19 does not have a nationality, and while it first appeared in China, it appears to have come to the U.S. from travelers from Europe. The U.S. may claim ownership of it now, if we wish, because the U.S. has more cases than any other country.
Went in and they've done a great job in protecting our property, federal courthouse and other property. And
the president is praising the federal stormtroopers that were sent in to Portland, saying that they are doing a great job. It is important to note that these forces were sent in against the will of the duly elected leaders of Portland. Portland's own mayor was tear-gassed by these troops last night, and the Attorney General is suing over the deployment of these troops.
Taking that off, that's remaining as it is. The delegates are going to get together. That's where they do their nomination. So the delegates are going to North Carolina, and they'll be doing the nomination. And we're going to do some other things with tele-rallies and online the week that we're discussing, which will be really good. I think we're going to do it well. And I'll still do a convention speech in a different form, but we won't do a big, crowded convention per se. It's just not the right time for that. I care deeply about the people of Florida and everywhere else, frankly, in this country and even in the world, who would be coming into the state, and I don't want to do anything to upset it. They'll be doing very well very shortly. We're going to put some maps up of the country behind me, and you'll see that the area that we're talking about is a hot spot. You'll also see a lot of the country has no problem whatsoever. Most of
it is simply not true to say that a lot of the country has no problem whatsoever. The virus is spreading, is surging in nearly all states.
Thank the Jacksonville community and its great mayor. He's great guy, really great guy. They wanted it so badly. And all of the other political representatives in Jacksonville and in Florida, and just very special people, a very special group, and they were there for us 100%. Today I want to provide an update on the actions we're taking to support the safe reopening of America's schools. Parents around the world who have had their children home for the last few months have a greater appreciation for the fact that teachers are essential workers, that they're essential to our children's future. Our goal is to protect our teachers and students from the China virus while ensuring that families with high-risk factors can continue to participate.
I don't want to take up too much time saying this because there is so much important news here, but it is not the China virus. Labeling it as such appears to have contributed to a rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Services often results in a social isolation, making it difficult for schools to identify and address important learning deficits, as well as child and adolescent physical and sexual abuse, substance abuse, depression, and suicidal ideation. This in turn places children and adolescents at considerable risk of morbidity and, of some cases, mortality. Beyond the educational impact and social impact of school closures, there's been a substantial impact on food security and physical activity for children and for families. So that's very important, and there's a highway, it goes both ways. The National Education Association recently stated, despite the momentous efforts of educators during the pandemic, online learning has never been an effective replacement for in-person learning and support. Being at the school, being on the campus is very, very important. One study estimates that due to school closures last spring, the average student will begin this school year roughly 35% behind in reading compared to the typical year. And
so I do feel that I need to highlight when the president says things that are accurate. And actually, I'd spend a lot less time talking at these if I would butt in to simply say when he said something that was true. It is indeed true that children are learning less, that children are being harmed by not being in classrooms, that the work that teachers do is in person, is invaluable. This is something that everyone agrees upon. There is no one on any political side of the aisle who does not want to get children back into school. The question is when and how. And the president frequently posits his actions as a choice between only two alternatives. Either do absolutely nothing or do exactly this. No one is saying children should be kept out of school forever. But what this administration has not done is put forth any sort of nationwide plan to allow for the safety of the children, of the teachers, of the school workers, of the family members of the children. This is arguably the greatest failure of the entire period of lockdown. The purpose of lockdown was never to stay hiding until the disease goes away on its own. It was to buy some time to make some plans and advance preparations. The president has consistently left things up to the state, and he has attacked governors who have taken an aggressive approach and praised governors who have taken a lackadaisical approach. And as a result, there are a large number of states with no clear plan at all as to how they would provide protections for students and teachers. And the administration has not yet offered any additional funds. Quite the reverse. He has threatened to cut off funds from schools that don't reopen without offering them a plan as to how they would.
Must be protected. Our sole focus is the health and well-being of America's children. I have a very, very special person who loves children, who's I think one of the greatest athletes of all time. A lot of people say the greatest pitcher of all time. Known as a relief pitcher, could have been whatever he wanted. Some people, he is the greatest reliever of all time by far, substantially more saves than anybody else. In fact, he got the Presidential Medal of Freedom recently. And I'm reading off these stats. I knew he was the best. I knew he was great, but I didn't know it was almost double anybody else. But he's a man who loves children, has children, loves children, works hard with children. We're going to go outside and be with some little leaguers. Mariano Rivera, you know, he's the Sandman, right? My wife said, darling, why do they call him the Sandman? I said, you know, they play the song. He just puts the batters to sleep. And that's exactly what happened. So having Mariano here is a great honor. Thank you very much. Was talking about children in schools. And there's nobody that's done more than you have. Thank you very much, Mariano. Fantastic man. Given these considerations, we believe many school districts can now reopen safely, provided they implement mitigation measures and health protocols to protect families, protect teachers, and to protect students. And we do have to protect the teachers and the families also. We have to remember that. All families should be empowered to make the decision that is right for their own circumstance. This is especially important if a child has underlying health conditions or lives with a parent or grandparent who's at higher risk. In cities or states that are current hotspots, and you'll see that in the map behind me, districts may need to delay reopening for a few weeks, and that's possible. That'll be up to governors.
The president refers to current hotspots. Again, this disease is surging, is on the rise in 41 out of 50 states.
Again, the children obviously have a very strong immune system, maybe even as strong as yours. They seem to be able to fight it off and not have a problem. So it's pretty amazing, actually.
The president has been repeatedly referring to the fact that children seem to be less likely to die from this disease. And that does indeed appear to be true, but he neglects several key details. First of all, Dr. Birx very recently put the estimated risk of death for children at about 0.01%. This would mean that if the 56 million school children who all in this country all went back to school without protections, if they were all exposed, even in a best case scenario, we could expect a terrifying death toll, thousands of deaths of students. It is false to suggest that children don't get sick. More than 175,000 children have become sick from this disease, and at least 228 have died. And while 228 is admittedly a far smaller number than the 142,000 overall who have died in the U.S., that is very little cold comfort for the 228 families who are grieving their children. And this emphasis on the immune systems of children does not take into account that children can spread the disease. Teachers are at high risk. 1/3 of teachers are over 50. Families are at risk. These students who go to school, even if they do not become sick, if they carry and transmit the disease, they spread it to the teachers, to the cafeteria workers, to the janitors, to their families back home, to their mothers, to their fathers, to their grandmothers, to the people in their community. And that is why the CDC had flagged full-time in-person classes as posing one of the, quote, greatest risks for spread of the disease.
Of the student. This way they can make the decision that's best for them. We cannot indefinitely stop 50 million American children from going to school, harming their mental, physical, and emotional development. Reopening our schools is also critical to ensuring that parents can go to work and provide for their families. The Council of Economic Advisors estimates that 5.6 million parents will be unable to return to work if schools do not reopen this year. It's a tremendous problem. It's a tremendous problem. Schools have to open safely, but they have to open. More than a dozen European countries, as well as South Korea, Taiwan, and many others, have already reopened schools, and cases have not risen.
Okay, well, what the president is saying there is grossly misleading. You cannot compare the situation in the U.S. with the situation in these schools. Recently, earlier this month, President Trump tweeted that Germany, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden had all reopened schools and said that that was proof that the U.S. could as well. On the day that President Trump tweeted that, Germany had 298 new cases. Denmark had 10 new cases. Norway had 11 cases. The United States had 55,000 new cases that day.
We're in close communication with governors and states. We have supplies, everything they could possibly need. We're very strong on supplies. Remember, I used to say the cupboards were bare. Well, now the cupboards are the opposite. Due to our historic efforts to increase...
Okay, a couple things here. President Trump has repeatedly suggested that the previous administration left him with, quote, cupboards bare. This has been rejected by people from the previous administration. Barack Obama's National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, maintains that President Trump inherited basically a fully stocked cupboard, but it also neglects the fact that he has been in office for 3 years. If the cupboards were bare, what was he doing to replenish them at that time? Secondly, the claim that states have everything they need is not true. States are again running out of supplies because the time that was bought with the lockdowns appears not to have been used to mass produce the items that were needed. We know that about 50 hospitals in Florida are at full capacity for ICU beds. There is a backlog of testing results in states where tests are available. There still are not enough, there is not the capacity to turn around the results for the test results to be meaningful.
By far, roughly half of the tests are either the rapid point of care tests, which frankly solves a lot of problem and delay, 5 to 15 minutes instead of waiting for service both ways in both directions and then at the lab. But roughly half of them now, which is a tremendous increase, are 5 to 15-minute tests or tests done in a hospital where you get the results back in less than a day, in some cases immediately.
The president is talking about how quickly some people can get results back, and it is true that many people in many areas can, but in many of the areas where the tests are most needed, that is not possible. I can tell you that one of our own producers who is based currently in a coronavirus hotspot state had to wait about 10 days for the result of the test, and during those 10 days that made it impossible to take the actions that would be needed to benefit from that information. If you have to wait 10 days to get a result for the test, you are potentially putting people at risk for 10 days without that information.
Of remdesivir are arriving this week. It's a lot. That's a lot. They're working round the clock to make it. It's had a tremendous impact. We've also shipped thousands of vials to Arizona, California, and Texas over the past 2 weeks. Arizona's doing very well. It's heading down. The numbers are heading down. I think very quickly. Governor's done a great job.
This is not true. It is simply not true to say that the numbers are heading down in Arizona. This one is quite personal to me. My in-laws live in Arizona. They are watching cases skyrocket. And what is particularly alarming, the president likes to say that we only have more cases because we are doing more tests, but what is important is the positivity rate. In New York, we are doing more tests than anyone else in the world, and we are getting back only about 1% of those tests as positive. That is good news. The Harvard Global Health Institute has said that you really need that positivity rate to be below 3% to say that the disease is under control. In Arizona, the current average positivity rate is nearly 25%.
Through a lot. Everybody's going through a lot. Yesterday I spoke to the heads of 4 different countries. All 4 are going through a lot, going through a hard time. This could have been stopped. It could have been stopped quickly and easily, but for some reason it wasn't. And we'll figure out what that reason was.
The president seems to be, again, pointing a finger at China, saying that this could have been stopped quickly and easily. It is important to note that the president, according to reports, was alerted to this threat in his daily briefings. He was alerted potentially as early as November 2019. He, throughout January, February, and half of March continued to say that this disease was not a threat. He did not declare a national emergency until the middle of March, long after emergencies had been declared in individual states, 6 weeks after the World Health Organization had declared an emergency. If this disease could have easily been stopped early, that would have required acting early. This president chose to wait months after receiving news of the risk.
Doing it, whether it's something that's done online, I guess you could call it online. So there could be nothing like our last convention. Unfortunately, that was a great convention and in a great place, as you know. We had a great time in Cleveland. But it's a different world, and it will be for a little while. We want to get the world back to what it was, and I think we'll have that, including great job numbers, including so many things that are happening so positive. I have to say the stock market is close to records. For NASDAQ, it is a record. It's already exceeded its highest numbers. But we want to get our country back to what it was.
So would your acceptance speech be from the White House, and are you worried?
We haven't said that yet, Steve. We'll have that. We'll probably announce that over the next few days.
Are you worried this might dampen enthusiasm for you?
Look, we've done a great job. We built the greatest economy in the world. Nobody close. Not China, not anybody. We had to close it. We saved millions of lives, and we opened it. But we had the best numbers in history for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, every group you want to name. Young people without a diploma, young people with a high school diploma, with a college diploma.
So the president frequently exaggerates about the strength of the economy prior to this crisis. It was indeed strong and working well for many Americans, but his characterization of it as the best in history is not true. And particularly this claim about Black Americans. President Obama presided over the largest ever drop in black unemployment. And while black unemployment did reach a record low under Trump, that is true, it was still roughly double that of white Americans. And more importantly, perhaps, black median income fell by $2,000 under Trump. And while there have been some recoveries, some job recoveries, very small in comparison to the number of jobs that have been lost recently, black Americans have been largely left behind by those job recoveries. And black Americans have been largely left out of the benefits of the Paycheck Protection Plan. The Center for Responsible Lending has said that 95% of black-owned businesses faced essentially no chance of getting PPP loans. And it is partly because of this that we have lost 440,000 black-owned businesses by April since the beginning of this crisis.
1,000 people. We had a tremendous thing planned in tremendous convention planned in North Carolina, and it would have been very good, but a much smaller version in Florida. But then we saw what was happening pretty quickly. We saw that the virus was coming up that coast. So,
Is an acknowledgement of the severity of the situation in Florida?
no, I think it's going to come and go. It will. I mean, you take a look at some of these locations. We're heavily infected. I mean, to a point where Deborah and I were talking that, you know, when you look at what happened in New York and what happened in New Jersey and other places, and now you're looking and it's gone. Hope it stays gone. I think it will. But we have to be vigilant. We have to be careful, and we also have to set an example. I think setting the example is very important. It's hard for us to say we're going to have a lot of people packed in a room and then other people shouldn't do it.
The president is talking about states where this has gotten under control. He used the phrase, it just disappeared. He makes it sound as if this happened by magic. Here in New York, we have been living essentially under lockdown since the middle of March. It was by an aggressive public health policy from the governors that these states have gotten this under control. And it is worth noting that the governors who acted most aggressively, the governor of New York, the governor of New Jersey, the governor of Washington, the governor of Michigan, have been the most successful in crushing the curve. And these are the very governors that the president has gone out of his way to attack, in the case of the governor of Michigan, calling her a half-wit and tweeting that his supporters should, quote, liberate Michigan. The governors whom he has praised have been the governors of Texas, the governor of Florida, the governor of Arizona. These are the governors who took the most lackadaisical approach to this crisis, who were the last to shut things down and the first to reopen things. And we are seeing the consequences of those actions as those states now become the states that are the hotspots.
If they want, again, we've done 50 million tests. There's nobody even close in the whole world. You look at our mortality rate, you look at our death rate, you look at different statistics, we're doing very well. But one death is too many. This should never have happened. This should never have been allowed to happen from China.
Also, Mitch McConnell's office just put out a statement a moment ago about the Phase 4 relief package, CARES 2, saying, quote, it's tailored precisely for this phase of the crisis. Yet it does not include your payroll tax cut. So do you believe it's perfectly
Yeah, I'd like to
tailored?
see a payroll tax cut. I think it's great for the workers. The Democrats would never have gone for it. They don't want it. They're not big into the workers, I guess.
So we have a problem, a terrible economic crisis in the U.S. right now, that we have historic unemployment, about 11% unemployment. You know who does not benefit from a payroll tax cut? People who are not on payroll. A payroll tax cut is great for people who have jobs. It does nothing to help people who are out of work. And when you cut taxes in one area, that takes money away that could be available for other things, which is why neither Democrats nor Republicans have seen a payroll tax cut as being an effective tool in our current crisis. It has been an effective tool at other times. It was an effective tool when President Barack Obama cut payroll taxes, and that helped stimulate the economy. It is not a helpful tool in a situation of mass unemployment that is not the result of a lack of demand, but is the result of a health crisis.
At the first pitch, and I think I'm doing that on August 15th at Yankee Stadium. And I say, how's the crowd going to be? And, you know, it's like you don't have a crowd. There is no such thing. It's going to be interesting, Mariano. He's not used to that.
So President Trump is saying that he is going to throw out the first pitch at a game on August 15th. This is interesting because he is the first president since William Howard Taft to have never thrown out a first pitch as president. So that will be interesting to see. It is also worth noting tonight that Dr. Anthony Fauci is throwing out the first pitch at the Nationals game. There will be no audience. There will be no crowds. This is socially distanced baseball.
Baseball is setting an example by, you know, playing to empty stadiums, and so are other sports. You see that. Now, then they'll allow a certain number in. I see golf is now soon will be allowing people to come in percentages, and all of a sudden we want to get back to normal. The key is to get back to normal because nobody wants to see this. But I think it's really good that baseball's opening. It looks like football's opening. It looks like sports are opening. We have, it's a tremendous thing psychologically for our country, and we're all with it. We're going to see right now some beautiful young little leaguers outside with a great future ahead of them. They're already practicing on the front lawn of the White House.
I want to butt in for a moment because the president has said we want to get back to normal, and well, we can debate what exactly normal is, but it is true that everyone of every political persuasion wants to get back to something more normal than this. The president seems to view the way to get back to normal is to act as if things are normal. He has, while he has lately called on Americans to wear masks, he has spent months refusing to wear one himself. He held a rally against the wishes of local public health officials with no masks and no social distancing. He has criticized governors for keeping businesses closed. He has criticized sporting leagues for not having the fans there. He has criticized schools for not reopening. He seems to want Americans to act as if everything is normal. But the fundamental thing here is the virus. No one can act as if things are normal while a pandemic is spreading throughout the country. And what is needed is not to change the symptoms of normality, but to change the cause.
And you could have literally quarter-mile tracks on top. It's a very big site, very wide site. So I think the best idea would be to build a new building, and that way you have it for a long time. Renovation can never be as good as a new building in that case. I know they're talking about it, whether or not they put it in this bill or someplace else, but the FBI needs a new building, and we'll get it done. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that is the end of today's briefing. I didn't get to answer many of your questions beforehand, so I want to try to answer at least one now. Ryan, you'd asked, and I had responded on Twitter as well. Ryan tweeted at me at apiper13, and Ryan had asked, is it legal for schools to open if the surrounding area is suffering from an outbreak? And if so, why is this legal? And the answer is yes, though many health experts advise against it. Some states, like Texas and Florida, are ordering schools to be fully reopened as early as next month, despite these states suffering from record-breaking numbers of new cases and hospitalizations. And President Trump has threatened to cut federal funding for schools that do not fully reopen in the fall. He does not actually have the authority to make the call as to when schools open and when they do not. This is a state-level decision. It is typically up to the governors. Karen asks a related question. Does Trump have the ability to withhold funding to states if they don't open their schools? And the answer is no. Trump has, as we've said, threatened to withhold Department of Education funding from schools. He can't do this without notifying Congress and likely getting their approval. Congress ultimately holds the power of the purse, and when Congress allocates funds for a certain purpose, it must be spent toward that purpose. This was one of the key elements in the impeachment. It was not only the fact that President Trump was abusing the power of his office to solicit a personal favor from a foreign leader, it was also that he was withholding congressionally authorized taxpayer-funded aid for another nation. Now, the federal aid for schools is only about 10% of the total school budget. Schools are mostly paid for at the local level. They are mostly paid for via property taxes. This is problematic. This is the reason why in wealthy areas, schools are well funded, and in struggling areas, schools are struggling. Now, this is why cutting the federal dollars is particularly painful. That 10% of funding that comes from the federal government is targeted largely to the schools that are struggling most. That federal funding, a lot of it is targeted to try to make up the difference between the wealthy districts and the poor districts. It's not enough money to do that. The poor districts still don't have enough, but President Trump is threatening to cut what little they have. This seems to be a disturbing application of the Peter principle. Unto those who have much, more will be given, while those who have little will lose even what they have. I think that is as much of your questions as we can get to today. I want to thank you for joining. I also want to call attention to the fact that in the brief period of time that President Trump was speaking, I'm just checking on the numbers, the U.S. death toll has now crossed to over 144,000. It crossed over in just the last hour as the president was speaking. Thank you for tuning in. I had support today from our full newsroom, most especially from Emily Barger, Ian McKenna, Alex Rabinowitz, Shelby Vacalin. My name is Alan Piper. Please stay safe. Please take care of the people you love. And please use this time to make sure that the people you love know how much you love them. We will get through this together. Thank you, and good night.